Okay, so hello, good morning, and welcome to the Spain Pavilion. Probably some of you know that we are today celebrating the Day of Oceans and Water. This is the Blue COP, so this is our pleasure to have such a very interesting panel today. We are having a very intense program of events in water and oceans, so I invite you to stay all the day with us. But now, especially, I invite you to listen to our wonderful speakers, and I would like to thank Rémi Parmentier for all the organization he has made of this panel. And Rémi, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much. I don't know, does this work? Yes, it works. Thank you, Alicia, and thank you to the Spanish government and the Spanish Pavilion for hosting us here. The Spanish government asked me to facilitate this opening of the Ocean Day, and it's my pleasure to do so. My name is Rémi Parmentier. I'm I think many of you already know, but for those who don't, I'm the coordinator or the secretary of the Because the Ocean initiative, which for this COP has released and presented on Tuesday this report, Ocean for Climate, which I think you found on your chairs. And for those who are watching us on streaming, you can download it at www.becausetheocean.org. The ocean is important for climate ambition, and the climate is important for ocean ambition, and this is reflected in our report. We have a panel which is made up of a combination of people who operate in the field of policy, of science, and of private sector innovation. Teresa Ribera, the Minister for the Ecological Transition of Spain, was in the program. She's been called, summoned to be at the Parliament, at the Palacio de los Diputados just now. So she's sent me a WhatsApp asking me to apologize on her behalf. But we're very lucky because we have Valvanera Ulargui, who is the head of the Spanish Office for Climate Change. And actually, Teresa, the minister, some years ago was in your seat. So, it stays in the family, and you will be able to speak on behalf of the Minister, Teresa Ribera. Thank you for being here, Valvanera. We also have Ambassador Peter Thompson, the Special Envoy of the UN Secretary General for the Ocean. Thank you, Peter, for being with us. Great ocean advocate. This will be followed by Heidi Rodriguez, Vice Minister of Costa Rica for the Seas. Right? And she will speak after Peter. And we have another Tika, another Costarricense, someone from Costa Rica, who will then take the floor from a scientific perspective, Melania Guerra, who is an oceanographer from Costa Rica and also a polar researcher. She's worked in Antarctica and in the Arctic, so that's very interesting when we think of climate and ocean. This will be followed by Jean-Pascal von Ippersel, who has been for a number of years a vice chair of the IPCC and who played a key role in the recent special report on the ocean and the cryosphere. And Lisa Levin from Scripps Institution of Oceanography. I said it right, yes? In San Diego, will also take the floor to discuss some issues concerning the high seas And finally, last but not least, we will have Mark van Petegem, the famous naval architect who is building wind-powered vessels or designing them in order to green the shipping sector. So with no further delay, I would like to propose that we start with Valvanera Ulargui, who is our host here in Madrid and in this pavilion. Valvanera, the minister was at the launch of the Ocean and Climate Report on Tuesday at the Thyssen Museum. She told us that the ocean was in her heart, but I think the ocean is in the heart of everybody in the Spanish government and in particular in your ministry, the Ministry for the Ecological Transition. So I was wondering whether you would like to open your heart for us.
Sure. Thank you very much, Remy. Thank you very much for facilitating this dialogue, which opened the Ocean Day here in the Spanish Pavilion. We will like to open our hearts to welcome you all in Madrid, and also to the oceans that are shouting that they need help. So thank you very much for bringing together all these people, all these friends, that all of them have track record in working for climate and also for oceans. I think that the nexus between climate and ocean is clear. We snowed up, that we need to put on track bold actions on climate change, ambitious actions on climate change to protect our oceans, to make, a new life for our oceans. And I think that this event, is clear on that objective. As you right say, the ocean is very close to the Spanish citizen heart. I was also personally involved in the process since Paris. At COP21, I was with you at the signature of the initiative, because the ocean, and I think that was the tipping point in all these international debates. And I would like to thank you and to thank you also for leading us in this process. Since then, a lot of things have already happened. We got a lot of events outside the UNFCCC process also that wanted to make that linkage, that wanted to really close, the problem and to go out of the silos. I think that is very important to treat, the ocean as one of the important elements, as one of the important solutions for climate change ambition, but also, as one of the important elements of our biodiversity that we need to protect. So a lot of events, as I said, have been happening since that. A lot of science knowledge have been increased. The IPCC report this year in ocean and cryosphere is the most important milestone. At the very beginning in Paris, we were talking about sequencing, that we need science, to inspire all of us, to guide, how to work in this nexus and how to protect our biodiversity. This report finally came. It was a wonderful report. It was very inspiring, and I would like to also express my gratitude to all the scientists that have made it possible, because it was tough at the beginning to put into the agenda. Spain was one of the countries that really fight for that, at COP21, and I think that is a great success, that we have increasing this knowledge, increasing this science knowledge that is important for the politician, but also for all the society. I think that is also very interesting how the Chilean presidency incorporate the issue in the agenda. I think that it's really anchored in the UNFCCC thanks to Chile and to other countries, but now there is no doubt that we need to deal with other items that are out of the silo of the climate change negotiations. We used to work, in very, very close programs, with very, very focused direction of all the mandates that we normally have from previous COPs. And I think that this is very pioneering on that sense. We finally introduced, the oceans as sectoral issue into the UNFCCC negotiations. And to be honest, it was very, very complicated, and I think that it will be very inspiring for the rest of the sectors. We are in a new phase of the multilateralism process. We need to create, an inclusive process that really integrates, all the climate action that is happening outside the negotiations and all the sectors that really imports and that really makes a difference to our emissions and to the adaptation measures. I also wanted to highlight that from the European perspective, we are also pushing very hard in these negotiations to have a clear mandate that the ocean and the climate have a linkage, that we have to protect it, and that we need future work in that sense. It will be part of the results of these COPs, and I think that if we success at the end of the next week in having, a clear mandate in any of the decision, probably in one CP25, that would sound, very strange to all of us, but it's the political decision of the COP. It's why we have to say to the outside world that is calling for more ambition, for more action, and also to protect, our biodiversity and especially our oceans. So we are also in this negotiation trying to push hard to have this clear mandate in the political decision of this COP. From the Spanish perspective, I think that as we have already said, Spain is a country that look at the sea. It has more than 1,000 kilometers of coast, and we have, a lot of 100 square meters, of marine protected by reserves. So we are proud of that. We have, a very, very intensive work from the administration to create these marine protection areas, but we are very proud of that, and we are working to increase them. And this is why, because we need also our sea to be healthy, we need also our ocean to produce and to be productive for the Spanish people, and it's part of it's also in the heart of the politics that the Minister Teresa Rivera is pushing hard from the beginning. I think that is the linkage between the coast and the sea is also very important, and we need to work on that because there is a huge impact in our coastal area, and we are suffering from many years. There is no doubt from the people that living on the coast that the climate change exists. That is not, a question of scientific, and it's not a question of the future. It's right now suffering all these impacts. We are working on measure this vulnerability and also on measure how we can be more adaptive to that. So we have a lot of programs in the administration that can, track all these impacts, and propose, to the local and to the regional competencies how to advance on the adaptation of this coast that is essential also for the health of the ocean. In order to close my intervention, I would like to share with all of you that we want to lead this process. I think that Spain, Chile, and Europe are leadership on protection of and conservation of the ocean. There is no other option for the future, and to comply with all the commitments that we have already taken under the SDGs and also under the Paris Agreement. As I said at the beginning, this is an innovative process for us, and we need also to integrate in our policy decision makers. So I think that this kind of event, this initiative, because the ocean and all the activities that are, surrounding the process are very, very important to put, a first step into the UNFCCC and to enhance, all the action for the coming years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Valvanera. You mentioned the IPCC report. As many of you know, the first Because the Ocean Declaration was contained a statement of support for the original proposal by Monaco to have a special report on the ocean at the IPCC. And it's good to remember that at the IPCC, even before the Because the Ocean Declaration, Spain was the first country to support Monaco in that proposal, followed by China, actually. So good. There is only one thing that bothers me in your statement. Several times you've referred to the oceans with an S, and as you can see on this map, there is only one ocean on this planet, and it's important to remember it because it shows us what we owe to the ocean, and that really this is a wildlife support system. Thank you. I hope that everybody can hear us. I see there are some people who cannot sit down. There are some seats still available here, and among the crowd here, I would like to recognize Manuel Barange, the Director for Fisheries and Aquaculture of the UNFAO, Vladimir, who runs the Intergovernmental Commission, Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission at UNESCO, and our friends from DJ Mare, Andreas and Madame Veit, and all of you, thank you for being here. So we have Ambassador Thompson and the Minister from Costa Rica. I've asked them to speak for 5 minutes in order to give an opportunity to Valvanera to react to what will be said by both of them. And Valvanera, today you are a minister, acting minister, because Teresa Ribera is stuck in the Congress. So we know that after reacting to the words of Ambassador Thompson and Minister Rodriguez, you'll possibly will have to leave us. So, Ambassador Thompson, I think you don't need much introduction here. So why don't you start? You're the UN Secretary General Special Envoy for the ocean. And for the ocean, you never say oceans. So
yeah, if we're talking about semantics, I don't ever say our ocean either. I mean, I think we belong to the ocean rather than the other way around. It's the ocean. Yeah, well, thanks. First thing I want to say, welcome everybody to the Blue COP. It's been a long time coming, and I really, really thank the government of Spain, government of Chile for making this happen. You know, you've heard about what Because the Ocean has been doing over the years. When Fiji was president of the COP back in Bonn, we with Sweden were pushing this ocean pathway coalition, which a lot of governments joined up to. But it's amazing that people were prepared to talk about climate change. Well, now we talk about climate crisis and talk about biodiversity without talking about the ocean. You know, the ocean, the major driver of climate. Biodiversity, well, the ocean is the main home of biodiversity on the planet. So it's all one thing, and I really hate this sort of siloed approach. We have to, when we're talking about ocean, climate, when we're talking about biodiversity, it's all one thing. It's an all one problem for the existence of humanity now, because without a doubt, we are in great trouble, and I think that's the important thing for us to be focusing on here at this Blue COP, that everything is not all right. Everything is not all right at all. You had the head of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, in his opening speech to this COP, saying that humanity is knowingly destroying the life support systems of this planet. You know, I apologize to those who were in the last event that I was speaking at, because I'm basically giving the same messages here. Even one of the panelists is sitting here with me. So it's okay, you just relax while I say the same thing I just did. But, you know, that's the import of it. The Secretary General of the United Nations, not me, not Greenpeace, not WWF, has told us that we are destroying the life support system of this planet. It's not being done by people from Mars or by the elephants or something. It's us, humanity. What are you doing to change that? You as individuals. You know, you can't leave this COP the same person you were when you arrive. The blue COP is about, we are facing a planetary crisis and we have to do something about it. You as individuals must go home as different people. Why? Because there is no healthy planetary ecosystem. You've heard me say this before. There is no healthy planetary ecosystem without a healthy ocean system, an ocean ecosystem, right? That's just logic, right? And we've been ignoring the ocean's ecosystem. It's great to be sitting opposite Vladimir Ryabinin, you know, who tells me that we only know between 5 and 10% about the ocean ecosystem. Imagine that, with all our great movement from the Stone Age to the Space Age. The vast reservoir of this planet, the ocean, we only know 5 to 10% about its ecosystem. That's incredible, really, when you think about it. Which is why we are putting our faith in science before we make the really big, heavy decisions, which we're going to have to be making around about 2030. So the United Nations has put in place the decade for ocean science for sustainable development, which runs from 2021 to 2030. That will hopefully get us to 95% to 100% of our knowledge of the ocean ecosystem. Because we're going to have to start making some very serious decisions in 2030, and we shouldn't be making them on the basis of some sort of Russian roulette game. Sorry, Vladimir. But it should be based on solid science, and that's what the decade's all about. Geoengineering. It's not a nice word now. Why? Because we know so little about what the options are. Seabed mining. Should we be digging up the greatest reservoir of carbon sequestration when we don't actually know about the ocean ecosystem yet? Obvious answer, no. We should wait, apply a precautionary principle, let the decade run its course, and maybe at the end of that decade, all that stuff will be all right. Geoengineering, deep sea mining, all the rest. But give science the chance to give us the diagnosis of the ocean ecosystem. And we know that the ocean is sick, it's a patient. We know it, and if I'm preaching the choir here on that, but maybe those listening in through live stream that don't know it, the ocean is sick. And I can tell you what the symptoms are, but we need to diagnose those symptoms so that around about 2030 we can start making those very serious decisions, which will have to be made. So I'm really glad to be here at the Blue COP, and I say again, thank you to Spain and Chile for making it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. There is a mistake here. Thank you, Peter, for this powerful statement. And I think we'll continue to have this conversation next year again in the Iberian Peninsula, because the second UN conference on the ocean will take place in Lisbon to assess progress on SDG 14. So now,
June, Lisbon.
From the 2nd to the 6th of June, indeed. Minister Heidi Rodriguez from a great ocean state, Costa Rica. I have had the leisure to be sometimes on top of some of your volcanoes in Costa Rica, and when the weather is right, you can see both the Pacific and the Atlantic in one shot. So that says a lot about your bond with the global ocean.
Exactly.
You're very active in the conversations about the blue outcome of this COP. Can you please tell us what you can tell us?
Yes, sure. Good morning, everyone. It's amazing to be here on the Oceans Day at the Blue COP. So it's a pleasure to start in this day with all of you in this panel. So yes, as Jaime told us, Costa Rica is 92% ocean. We are ocean. If you ask any Tico, Tica Costa Rican what is their relationship with the ocean, they're probably going to tell you a lot of stories about that relationship. However, although we have done a really good job protecting our land, almost 30% of our land is under one form of protection. We only have less than 3% of our ocean protected. So we want to increase that number, and we have committed to achieve a higher goal than the Aichi target by promoting marine spatial planning based on science, participatory processes. We need to rethink marine protected areas. We need to think about the benefits for the present and the future generations. We need to think about people in these decisions. So over the last 10 years, we as country have realized the importance of ensuring a productive, healthy, and resilient ocean for the people and the ecosystem. Next year, as you know, it's called the Super Year. So Costa Rica is leading with France what we have called the High Ambition Coalition for People and Nature. What we want to have is a group of very ambitious countries committed to achieve the target of protecting 30% of our planet, our ocean, and our land in 2030. So following this line and answering also the call of past conference on climate change and the call of scientists here, we have been working with Chile since the pre-COP to ensure this to be a blue COP as well. And during this year, we have worked with Fiji, Indonesia, Palau, Panama, among other countries, to make sure that at the end of this COP, we can have a text that at least can highlight 4 points. That we can raise the profile of the ocean and climate nexus, opening specific actions to build in a global manner, promote coherence in addressing ocean and climate issues, not only under the UNFCCC, but also in other processes as the CDB or the BBNJ negotiations. We want to increase knowledge on the capacity to address these issues and mobilize proper actions to actually get and meet the Paris Agreement targets. We have enough scientific information. The evidence is there. We know and we understand and we must realize that a healthy ocean implies a healthy climate system. There is no other way. And we also need to understand that ocean matters means also food security for a lot of people around the globe. We have this huge responsibility as our generation to have an answer, a real answer, a concrete answer for the crisis that we are living in. So talking about nature-based solution, ocean-based solution will help us mitigate and adapt our planet, our humanity, for the climate change impacts. So from this Blue COP, the 25th, to the next Blue COP in the UK, we are going to have a huge amount of events, Lisbon, the CDB, what we hope that will be the final discussion for the BBNJ treaty as well. So this is a great opportunity for us as humanity, as decision makers, as scientists, to actually use this time to promote action, real action. The time is now. We need inclusion, we need ambition, and we cannot wait more. So hopefully, we are going to have at the end of this COP a real blue COP with a real blue outcome. So let's build that together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heidi. We wanted to give just a few minutes or a few seconds to Valvarena to respond, react. I have seen that the chief of staff of the minister is telling you that it's time to go. So very quickly, a reaction to what you've just heard from Costa Rica?
Thank you, Remy. I think that I can only echo all the statements that both are made. I think that it's wonderful to have leaders like you, pushing for the agenda and sharing with us what is really important in life, that is the ocean and the health of our planet, and to put people at the center of all the decision. It's our responsibility, and I think that this Blue COP will be a success with the help of all of you, and also you can count on Spain to make it successful, and for the next year in Lisbon, we will be there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Valvarena, and please thank you for your commitment and for the government of Spain's commitment to blue action. Now we're going to move to the scientists, and we're going to start with another Tika, another person from Costa Rica. This is Melania Guerra, who, as I said, is an oceanographer and a polar researcher. She's known in Costa Rica under the name of La Tica Polar, because not many people from Costa Rica have been working in both Antarctica and the Arctic. I think you want to tell us what the ocean is telling us in very concrete terms.
Thank you, Remy, and thank you, everybody. When I was informed about this event, in the panel, the honorable panel that we have, and the title, What is the Ocean Telling Us? I felt compelled to come and tell you, as a bioacoustics oceanographer, that the ocean is not silent at all. Despite the title that Jacques Cousteau gave it, The Silent World, the ocean is filled with sounds. So for this panel, I would like to bring in my, in my seat, the voices of the ocean. All of those voices that tell information about that environment, that convey information, communication, the transferring of information that is going on underwater. And how do we collect those voices? Well, I actually get to go on ships and deploy instruments, or sometimes it's more exciting and we dive down to put down instruments at the bottom, or sometimes even put the instruments on the animals and the whales carry the instrument with them, and we collect all of those voices of the ocean. So what are those voices? Who are those voices? Sometimes those voices are marine mammals. These are humpback whales. And humpback whales we are starting to see going from the subarctic into the Arctic region, a territory that normally they wouldn't be at. But as the Arctic melts, they have more space available and other locations of food. And we're starting to see the ecosystem shift and have new presences, new voices that we can hear. Or we can hear the bowhead whale, also in the Arctic, a really important voice and a really important resource for the indigenous communities of the North Slope and other Arctic communities. That instead of being musical like the humpback, sound more like jazz improvisers. And then we also hear blue whales. Blue whales are the biggest animal and also the animal that has the lowest frequency, the lowest, the sound is the lowest possible frequency, and we have to accelerate it so you can actually hear it. It almost sounds like an earthquake coming, and we're starting to hear these voices be more and more present in areas like California and the Antarctic Peninsula, where they are repopulating places where there used to be very few after the hunt. I personally love to hear pinnipeds, for example, these bearded seals. Bearded seals have a voice that sounds almost as if it were from outer space. And what does that tell you? That tells you important things also for the native communities of the North Slope. when they are there, when they are leaving, when the peak of the population happens. And this is important for the substance of the communities. I don't know if you've ever heard what a walrus sounds like. A walrus, you would never guess that this animal sounds like this. And in the Arctic, it's not just the voices of the biological voices that we listen to, it's also the environment itself. We can hear when the ice arrives because it sounds like it's grinding and moving. So we can connect that to the satellite records of when the ice arrives. And we can also start telling that we have oceans that are 3 weeks longer of open water because we can hear the wind instead of the ice. What this means is that having 3 extra weeks right now of open water instead of ice in the Arctic means that, of course, the commercial and oil exploration activities are going on for longer. And then other colleagues that go and listen to the ocean voices in other latitudes have found that it's amazing the recognition that healthy coral reefs sound essentially different than a degraded coral reef. So this data from the University of Exeter in the UK was able to find a correlation between recruitment of larvae and the sound of a coral reef. So if the coral reef is healthy, it is equivalent to having an orchestra that has all the instruments and sounds really nice. And the larvae apparently can detect that difference and go preferentially recruit there. This is an orchestra that has all the instruments. This is a coral reef that is healthy. But if you go to a coral reef that's degraded, it's as if you had removed those instruments. And it's not that I'm lowering the volume, it's literally that there are less voices in this coral reef. So if you ask me, what is the ocean telling us? I would personally say the ocean is saying, can you just please listen to me? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Melania, for a wonderful presentation. And I'm sure that this presentation resonates in all of us, and in particular in our friend Francesca Thyssen, who welcomed us at the Thyssen Museum on Tuesday, where we presented and celebrated the Ocean for Climate report, because I know that Francesca is passionate with the issue of ocean noise and ocean acoustic pollution. So you two have a lot to talk about. So thank you. Now we're going to continue with the program, and we are going to hear Jean-Pascal von Ypersel, who, as I said earlier, is a former vice chair of the IPCC and one of the co-authors of the recent special report on the ocean and cryosphere. And so I would like to ask you specifically, Jean-Pascal, if you could explain why the ocean is so important for climate ambition, to increase climate ambition.
Thank you, Remy. And first, small correction, I'm not a co-author of the report. I helped the report to be born at some point, but I'm not a co-author of the report. I helped for the summary for policymaker in the plenary, but
well, you were very active in Monaco.
Yeah, but it's important to be right. Yeah, I think the ocean is very important for climate ambition. And if you allow me, since the IPCC has now been in existence for 30 years, I'd like to stand back a little bit and first try to summarize in 10 words the tens of thousands of pages of the IPCC report, because that's an important context. 10 words only, with your permission. It's real. It's us. Experts agree. It's bad. There is hope. And in that badness, the oceans have a role. The ocean has a role. Sorry, Remy. And in the hope part, the ocean has a role as well. So I hope you can see this because it's, I think this summarizes in a very dynamic way the urgency of the situation in which we are with the climate system, in which, again, the ocean is an important part. This animation shows on the left the increase since 1850 in the CO2 concentration, going from 218, the pre-industrial time, to 410 right now. And I like this presentation because it suggests the increasing thickness of the insulation layer that we are installing around the planet. And as we know, in winter, we put additional insulation layer around our body when we are cold, 1, 2, 3 possibly. And if we put too many layers, we become too hot. And this is exactly what is happening. Now, if you look at the right part of the animation, showing over the same time frame since 1850 up to now, the increase in global temperature, you see that we have gained 1 degree overall in globally average temperature over the same period of time. And we understand, without any complicated climate model, why it is so urgent to get to zero emissions globally. Because as long as we don't go to that speed of zero, which means stopping before the obstacle, that insulation layer I'm showing you on the left will continue to increase in thickness, and we will at some point suffocate under that insulation layer, including the ocean. That's why the special report that was presented at length yesterday in a very dynamic and interesting session, in a 3-hour session, the special reports of the IPCC on the ocean and cryosphere in a changing climate is so important. And I knew there would be many things said in this, many interesting things said in this panel. So I'd like to just highlight only a few elements which are trying to address the question you raised, Remy. And since the report is about not only the ocean, but the ocean and cryosphere, I think it's important to remind us why that connection is so important. And if you look at polar regions and in mountain regions, there are things that are visible and there are things that are less visible. Something that is very visible in Arctic regions is that the ice is melting. For example, look at this glacier, how it looked in 1961. Look at where the ice is 40 years later. This is how, from exactly the same point, the ice looked. The ice is basically gone. Where is that water gone? Well, in the ocean. And this is one of the factors increasing sea level. But it's not the only one. There are 2 others. The second one is that water expands when it's heated, and up to now it has been a very important factor in the increasing sea level. But then a third factor, and I'm sorry for the spelling mistake, there's an R missing in Antarctic, but a third factor is becoming more and more important, and that is the melting, the slow melting of the ice sheet of Greenland and Antarctica. Every 16 hours, those ice sheets together lose 1 billion cubic meter of water that is added to the ocean and which contribute to the increase in sea level. This is the volume showed on that picture there. If you know Central Park, this is the surface of Central Park over the height of the highest skyscraper. Every 16 hours. So it's hundreds of billions of cubic meter of water added every year to the ocean. And of course, this, if we stay on the present trajectory in terms of emissions, will lead to several meters in increasing sea level. And this should, if you compare, particularly in the longer term, I mean, a lot is mentioned about 2100. For the ocean, it is very important to look beyond 2100. Look, for example, the main curve on the right there, showing the increasing sea level up to 2300, and see why there is hope. If we are able to be on the lowest emission trajectory, so if we have the highest ambition level considered in this report, we would stabilize sea level and save many ecosystems and many people who would otherwise suffer increasingly under just that sea level increase in extreme events, frequency and intensity, etc. But if we stay on the present course, we would, by the end of that 300-year period, get somewhere between 2.5 and more than 5 meters sea level. Most of Fiji would be underwater. Part of Costa Rica, and actually my country, Belgium, as well, and hundreds of billions of people in the world would be affected. Just one example to show why more ambition is important, and it's a message that the ocean situation can help us understand. Just look at this diagram. It's 20-year-old, so probably the number of 10 million people living in that red zone is not correct anymore. It's probably more today. This is the Nile Delta. What is red here is what is just 1 meter above the level of the ocean, because the Mediterranean Sea is connected to the ocean. I understood that. And it's also an area where more than 10 million people are cultivating land and living. So they will be affected enormously if the level of ambition is not increased significantly. Then, to raise my second point, which is another point raised by Peter about ecosystems, ecosystems suffer more and more. And just to give one example, is the Great Barrier Reef. A full inventory was made in 2016 and again in 2017, showing that only 7% of that Great Barrier Reef, one of the most important marine ecosystems in the world, had avoided coral bleaching, the first stage of death for those coral and silent coral, as we just heard from Melania. If you look at this diagram, which is not in the IPCC report in that form, but which I think is very shocking, it shows the level of acidity, which is one of the reasons why those coral reefs are suffering, because of this these dozens of billions tons of CO2 that we have added to the ocean over the years. This diagram, and I'm showing it so that you can see it as well, shows the level of acidity measured by pH over the last 25 million years. You see that over that period it was almost stable. But then, if we stay on the present trajectory, we will have a shock in terms of acidity, and you can imagine the effect that would have on ecosystems. Of course, they also suffer from the heat itself, so it's a combination of marine heat waves and acidity. By the way, a short remark on geoengineering, because you mentioned that. That would be an aspect, acidification of the oceans, that would not be alleviated by solar radiation management, geoengineering. If you believe that by installing a parapluie, how do you say a parapluie? An umbrella. Thank you. An umbrella to decrease solar radiation, that might be good for temperature. It would be very dangerous, maybe for some aspect in the climate system, for example, the monsoon systems, but it would not help at all for the acidification of the ocean. So solar radiation management, geoengineering, was already labeled by IPCC several times as something that needs to be considered with a lot of caution.
But IPCC did say, without carbon capture or CDR, that we have a 2 degrees overshoot. That's basically the reason we need to be discussing it.
Yeah.
That was IPCC that told us to get serious.
But absolutely, but solar radiation, I mean, that technique for geoengineering for sure wouldn't help the ocean at all.
Correct.
So that's the conclusion of the Ocean and Cryosphere report, that this report helps to highlight the urgency of raising the ambition level, and the ocean is a key messenger for that. The more decisively and the earlier we act, the better. Humanity has a choice, staying on the present trajectory, in which case we would be in a much warmer world, including in the oceans, with a lot of consequences both for people and ecosystem, or be on a lower trajectory associated with a high level of ambition, and then the effect will be much smaller. Final word in French, if you allow me. For those of you speaking French, there's a very interesting newsletter which my team published, and this is probably the only French-speaking summary available of the Ocean and Cryosphere report. It's distributed free electronically. Please subscribe, and this is the address, the first one, where you can find this presentation very soon, and also the newsletter, as mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean-Pascal. Yes. Ambassador?
Could I just apologize? I have to go. I want to apologize to my distinguished colleagues who've yet to speak. I have to go and speak on ocean acidification, actually. Bad scheduling. But I apologize to all the audience as well. But it's been so great. And next time we have a noise pollution event, you've got to come and make that presentation. Because we talk a lot about pollution, but noise pollution doesn't get enough coverage. You know, the oil and gas industry, every time they put off one of those seismic gun explosions, they kill zooplankton for something like a 1 kilometer range around them. You know? That's noise pollution and everything else that's going on with our human noise in the ocean. But thanks so much, everybody. This is a really great session. Thanks, Remy.
Thank you, Peter. And we're going, and thank you, Jean-Pascal. We're now going to turn to another scientist, that's Lisa Levin from Scripps. And I think, Lisa, that I don't know if I should say your role or your obsession at this Blue Cup is to draw attention on the role of the high seas. Because we talk a lot in terms of mitigation on the role of coastal environments, but maybe not enough on the emerging science that is coming up about the role of high seas ecosystems, and I think even Antarctic ecosystems. And I think that is what you would like to address. So. Please, am I right in summarizing your concerns? And please tell us. It should work.
Okay. I really wish Peter Thompson had stayed to hear what I have to say, but maybe I'll send him an email about it. All right. Well, we are here at COP negotiating the Paris Rule Book and that rule book will cover all the land, but only 40% of the ocean. That part of the ocean that falls within the exclusive economic zones. And so you can see up here, 60% of the ocean, the tan part, the light brown part, defined by the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea as the high seas and the area. All of that falls outside the mandate of nationally determined contributions. I mean, this 60%, it's 40% of the planet, and it's about 95% of all the habitable area for life on this planet. And we know now that this realm provides us with essential climate services. We've been hearing over and over again this week how much heat it absorbs, how much carbon it absorbs. And this high seas, deep sea realm, it consists of a whole vast array of ecosystems. Underwater, let's see, I have a slide on that. Oop, the background didn't show up. Okay, well, anyway, you can't see the writing, but underwater mountains, we call them seamounts. There's mountain ranges underwater. There's thousands of canyons. There are forests. These are made up of corals and sponges in deep water. We have abyssal plains that cover thousands of kilometers. We have deep sea trenches, and we have this huge expanse of water in the vertical. And all of these ecosystems have their own species. There's a huge array of biodiversity there, although most of it remains unexplored and undescribed and undiscovered. But we do know that this realm is essential to the capture and sequestration and burial of carbon from the seafloor. Also, as we discover these systems, we discover a whole host of resources that there is now growing interest in exploiting. So phosphorites from our low oxygen zones, and polymetallic nodules from the abyssal plains, and cobalt crust from seamounts, and massive sulfides from hydrothermal vents. They all have metals that we need for our electronics industry and our green energy industries, or we think we need them. We've discovered oil and gas in our canyons that we're exploiting fossil fuels. We've discovered there's aggregations of fish, which taste pretty good, deep sea fishes at methane seeps and aggregated around seamounts, aggregating around the deep water coral reefs, and we're even beginning to exploit some of these in the mesopelagic, those little tiny fish that migrate up and down every day. We know that climate change is happening in these and affecting these ecosystems. All the heat and carbon that's taken up at the surface, it doesn't stay there. Thermohaline circulation brings it down into deep water, and we can already begin to measure the changes, the acidification, warming, and oxygen loss in deep water. So our observing programs, our Argo floats, tell us that all this is happening. Many of the animals that live here live for hundreds to thousands of years, and their environment's changing. They've been in a very stable environment, and their ability to adapt to these changes is really in question, although it hasn't been well studied. At the same time, we have industrialization of the deep sea. We have bottom fishing in the deep sea. We have energy extraction in the deep sea. We're poised to potentially mine minerals or genetic resources. So I would like to suggest at this point that we need to be considering mitigation and adaptation options in that 60% of the ocean not covered by the NDCs. We essentially need an NDC for the international ocean. I don't know if we would call it an international DC, an IDC, or an ABNJ but we need to think about mitigating and adapting our activities in that part of the ocean. And there are many, many mitigation options that we consider in coastal and shallow waters and our EEZs, but many of these are relevant to the international ocean. Reducing our emissions, wind farming, aquaculture and seaweed farming, some of that may ultimately happen in the international ocean. And we've heard about geoengineering. There are quite a few options. Remy wanted to make sure I mentioned that right now most of these options are counter the London Protocol and the CBD recommendations, but the IPCC reports and others tell us we may eventually, as a last resort, have to do some geoengineering. And some of these, iron fertilization, alkalinity, biomass burial, subsurface burial of CO2, they may be targeted in that international ocean. So these are some mitigation measures that could appear in the future. There's also a lot of adaptation potential in the international ocean. We talk about marine protected areas. These can increase resilience of ecosystems. They can provide climate refugia. We need to and the BBNJ, of course, is considering these for the international ocean. These could be part of mitigation in an international NDC. We need to preserve that hotspots of carbon fixation and carbon burial. We can have adaptation that improves the safety of infrastructure in the international ocean, which is growing. And we need to reduce the cumulative impacts of disturbance, things like fishing disturbance. science is a form of adaptation as well. Ocean observing in the high seas and the deep seas can help predict weather. It can improve the climate models. It improves our understanding of heat, salinity, oxygen, and CO2 budgets. And it probably is going to provide the baseline data that we would need to understand the impacts of geoengineering in the ocean if we ever get to that point. We need a lot of progress. We need broader observing systems. The ocean observing is fairly sparse at this point, especially in deep water, and we need to coordinate the research. The other thing to think about is some of the adaptation for the international ocean might occur on land. It might be the circular economy that we need to reduce our metal demand so that we don't have to mine from the deep sea and lose the potential carbon sequestration and other ecosystem services provided by that deep sea. So my final point is, who would actually create an NDC for the international ocean? And do the states have a responsibility under the law of the sea to protect the marine environment in those waters from pollutants such as carbon dioxide? There's a biodiversity treaty being negotiated right now. It only very briefly mentions climate, but I would suggest that climate mitigation and adaptation could be introduced into all the aspects that they're talking about: area-based management and marine protected areas, into environmental impact assessment, into capacity building and genetic resources measures. So, ideally, the BBNJ scientific body could team up with the UNFCCC and create some sort of IDC, NDC, I don't know what we would call it, to cover that other 60% of the ocean.
Thank you very much for a challenging presentation. And with that presentation, we've started to talk about solutions. This is a very good opportunity to move to the next and final speaker, who is going to talk of one of the solutions. We're going to call on someone that that maybe we should call a special guest because it is his first COP. However, Mark van Petegem is someone who is very, very well known in France and very famous in the sailing world worldwide. Throughout his long career, Mark has designed some of the most performant, record-breaking sailing boats who have broken records after records. As an aside, the boat with which Greta Thunberg crossed the Atlantic from east to west this summer was one of his babies. I'm talking of the boat, not of Greta, of course. And now Mark is also dedicating a lot of his time to developing the wind engine for the transportation of goods at sea. And Mark, you are an extremely busy entrepreneur. And on behalf of all of us, I'd like to thank you for coming to your first COP at actually fairly short notice. So you have 10 minutes to give us a message of hope, I think.
Okay. Thank you, Remy, for your kind words, and it's very impressed to be here with you to tell you about what we're doing. I'm a naval architect, designer, coming from the recreational and racing side, and about 10 years ago, we thought what we could do, what knowledge we could transfer from what we've learned in the racing sector to the shipping sector, trying to help decarbonating this difficult sector, which is really reluctant to change. There are two ways to reduce emissions. One is to look at the emissions themselves, and you can add, for instance, scrubbers, fit out scrubbers on ships, which will clean the fumes, or you can use cleaner fuel, biofuel, LNG, one day hydrogen, I hope, or you can work on the engine power demand to propel the ship to a certain speed, by, for instance, working on the hull drag or on the propeller efficiency. But there is one thing which is the only thing which offers 10% more power demand on the ship is the wind. The wind is an old friend of the sailors for more than 5,000 years ago, but it has somehow been forgotten by this industry. In 2010, we designed this boat. It's a trimaran who won the 33rd America's Cup. That we designed this boat, and the wing sail you see is 68 meters long. It's exactly like a plane wing. It has two elements, and we thought that maybe because we can, its performance is very, very good. It's twice as a normal rig, twice the force, and we could also very easily predict its performance and according to the wind parameters, so it could be automatized, and if we could manage to furl it, refit, it could be a good solution for the shipping sector. So that's we did. We developed a prototype that shows full functionality, and then we set two wings on Energy Observer. Maybe you know this boat. It's a laboratory of energy, solar and hydrogen, for ship propulsion. This summer, they sailed from the Solent to Baltic to Spitsberg and back, and everything went well, and the performance were exactly in line with what we were saying. Beginning of 2018, Ariane Group sent out a tender. They wanted a new contract for the transportation of the elements of Ariane 6 from the European harbors to French Guiana. And so we designed together with Zéphyr Boré and Gifmar, two ship companies, this boat, this ship. She is a very special ship because this is a very special market. It's a very special, difficult, and it's a difficult usage. She is 121 meters long. She has four wings, which are 363 square meters. We made simulation to see what would be the emission saving on 11 voyages a year, and based on the 6 last years of historical weather pattern, we found out a saving of 30% of the emission, which is a very encouraging result. The boat, she will be launched in the spring 2022, and we also developed a navigation program because she works a little bit like a sailing vessel. There's a big optimization in the route if you follow the weather pattern. And usually, the vessel go from A to B, following a direct route. We are navigating and to take the best advantage of the wind. We wanted to look at what speed does in the shipping industry. We studied an LNG carrier, 330 meter long, on an ocean passage. They usually fitted with 6 wings like those ones, and usually they're sailing at 18 knots. At 18 knots, it's 11 days. We did the same with reducing the speed to 14 knots, which was 3 more days in the passage. And we get to a 50% reduction. Of course, we know that resistance to motion increases with the square root of with the square of the speed. So reducing the speed is a very good saving factor. The problem is, are we going to be able to manage to wait 3 more days and to be exactly in the IMO goals by 2050? That's a problem. I think we only change under constraint or because we can see the benefit to do so. But big companies like IKEA or Michelin's are already asking their supply chain to decarbonate, to reduce their carbon footprint, and maybe under social pressure, the shipping industry will understand that what is seen as a constraint today can become a marketing opportunities, and maybe we will soon feel a nice little breeze of change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mark. For those of you who are not from Europe, when Mark refers to Ariane, this is the European space program, and what they'll be carrying from Europe to Guyana, where the launch pad is located, French Guyana, is the rockets or rocket elements of the European space program to launch the satellites, which in part watch the state of the of our environment from space. So it's very encouraging to see that a very top technological, very advanced technological sector is coming back to the wind. You wanted to say something?
No, I forgot to say that the travel will be from Bremen, Rotterdam, Le Havre, Bordeaux, Kourou, and back. At the maximum of 11 travel a year.
And I was listening to Mark. I was thinking that if any one of you know Jeff Bezos, the boss of Amazon, maybe you should give him a call and tell him, hey, I've been listening to a French guy who has a really good option for you to carry your stuff that you sell all over the world, and maybe you should commission a few wind-powered vessels to Mark. We have a few minutes now to have, questions and answers. I mentioned a few of you, including Manuel Barrange from the FAO. I should also mention our friend Rocio Parra from Chile, who works at the Universidad Pontificia, right? Who I had the pleasure to meet in Concepcion, Chile, a little more than a year ago, and she had a very interesting concept that she was sharing. maybe some of you would like to just to react very briefly. We don't have much time to what you've been hearing, and then maybe Vladimir, maybe the European Commission. But we start with very briefly with Rocio, and then Manuel, you would like to maybe to say something.
Thank you very much, and it has been a pleasure to hear you all. And what Remy was saying is that we had the opportunity to speak in that meeting in Concepción in Chile, and we were speaking about this idea of maritorio, that is in Spanish, because we usually speak about land and territory, but for us as Chileans and for Costa Ricans and other countries, we usually feel like we are really small in means of land and territory, but when we use this word of maritorium or maritorio, that is in Spanish, it changed the idea of how our countries are. So that was something that I think it's really important to approach, and especially when we need to make this relationship between oceans, climate change, and hope. So that was something that I just wanted to share. Thank you, Remy.
Thank you. It's very inspiring. I think in English we also talk of sea space as opposed to or complement to landscape. In French, I've been since I met you in Chile, I've been talking of the méritoire, but it's a bit difficult to explain. But this is, as I said, there is only one ocean. You remember that map? And that map is the maritorio, and we have to always remember what we owe to the maritorio. Thank you, Rocio. Manuel, you have been the coordinator, main author of the huge piece of work of FAO about the adaptation of the fisheries and aquaculture sector to climate change, published by the FAO a year ago. A lot has happened since. Please, how do you see things?
Thank you. Good morning, afternoon, everyone. Yes, I'm a marine biologist, I'm a scientist, I'm a climate change scientist, and I've been working on issues of climate change and oceans for a very long time. And for a period of my life, I spent more time at sea than on land. And those were the times where you had one conversation with your family from a boat on the radio a month, 5 minutes. That was too expensive otherwise. And the ocean is not just blue. It is blue, of course, but it's not just blue. It's a place where 1/10 of the world relies on for their livelihoods. And that provides an enormous amount of food and services as well. And the one thing, I work for the FAO, which is an organization whose only raison d'être is to stop hunger in the world. And that means trade-offs. So we are just about lunchtime, and when you go to lunch today, just look at your plate, look at what you're eating, and think about what has had to happen for that food to be on your plate. And you'll realize that it is all about trade-offs. And understanding the trade-offs on land as well as in the water, or on water, is one of the most important and most challenging things that we have to do and handle. And the FAO deals with that. How do you protect livelihoods, how you protect food, and how you make sure that we all have a plate to eat at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuel. Thank you for reminding us of the basics. I have seen Francesca, but maybe I'll ask Francesca to close. And would you like to say something, Vladimir? So we have the honor to have the head of the International Oceanographic Commission with us.
You know, I just realized it's very difficult to pronounce the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission.
Especially with the French accent.
Yeah. But Remy, thank you for putting me on the spot. What I would like to state is I think it's we have to come back to history and remember what was happening in the Conference of Parties in 2009 in Copenhagen, when all the science was there and no decision was taken. So then scientists started to think what was the problem. And not only have to generate the science, but then we have to also make it work in such a way that actions are taken. So now we have the Paris Agreement. Are emissions reducing? They are not reducing. So in the ocean, the situation is similar. We know what is happening, but unfortunately, the pollution is still flowing to the ocean, and of course, the emissions also generate a lot of issues there. So now we need the science that motivates action, and that's exactly the point why we so insist on the indicator for science for sustainable development. So we will move from the science that is based on curiosity. The science is offering action, is motivating for action, in making the world, which is really important, also in the domain of climate, everywhere, the world has to become more transparent. So the decisions that are taken in the echelons of power are visible, and we know what is going to happen and who did what. Thank you.
Thank you, Vladimir. I was reminded that a minute ago we only had 5 minutes left. Would the European Commission like to say something very briefly, and then we'll ask our friend Francesca to close the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Remy. I will not say much because so much has been said on this panel. I really share all the opinions that have been said today. What I only want to do at this stage is to announce that tomorrow the European Union will have its contribution to the Ocean Day. Our event starts at 10 o'clock tomorrow at 10 o'clock in, yes?
Okay, 9:30, no? I thought.
It's a preparatory meeting, so it starts at 10 in the European Pavilion in the Brussels room. So I hope to see you all there. There we will hear more about the European Union's thoughts. Thank you.
Yes, and there'll be, I happen to know that they have a very full program with, it's really exciting because I've had a preview of the program even before it was published, so don't miss it. And maybe just to close, Francesca Thyssen was a host on Tuesday at the Thyssen Museum when we presented together with Prince Albert and the Minister of Culture of Spain and the Minister of Science of Chile and Teresa Ribera from Spain, the Ocean for Climate report, and Francesca, a great ocean advocate. Please tell us, yes, there is something extraordinary that you should go and see at the Thyssen, and maybe tell us.
I actually wanted to stay with the panel conversation because I thought it was so important. And Remy, I think you put an amazing panel of people together and I found it really, really interesting and informative. But I do feel to some extent that offsetting decisions to 2030 feels very similar as offsetting our carbon footprint, which we all like doing in order to make ourselves feel better. But actually, we're not really making such a huge difference. And I think that when I hear the minister speaking about first steps, I heard Peter Thompson talking about big decisions in 2030. A lady from Costa Rica mentioned we need to think about we do need to think about a lot of things. You also said some really challenging and decisive things as well. I'm picking on the more weaker points. But I don't think we can wait anymore. And Jean-Pascal, you were saying we're having an acidification. We will have an acidification shop. I think we are having an acidification shop. And Lisa, you were talking about coordinating scientific research. I think that's a very, very, very important point. But where are the decisions that people are taking on this panel today at this COP meeting? That's really the question that I wanted to have, because I fear, and I think a lot of people are fearing, that a lot of these decisions are being offset into the future. And we're talking about science as if we haven't had several decades of ocean science. And I know that Lisa is the greatest speaker for ocean science. And in that sense, since this is a panel about climate and the oceans, I wanted to ask you one final question. If you could really elaborate for us a little bit more about ocean sequestration and how the ocean being the greatest sink for CO2, how does that actually happen? Because I didn't see that point elaborated enough on this panel. Are you allowed to answer? Are we allowed to ask? Thank you.
Thank you. It's okay. Thank you. I think you've asked some very important questions that need to be answered throughout this Ocean Day, that will have a continuation tomorrow. There are a lot of events where, as was reminded to us by the European Commission in particular, and these are very important questions that need to be rehashed and answered through this Ocean Day today and its continuation tomorrow, and of course through the negotiations next week, because there is a push to have some ocean elements in the COP outcome, because it's the whole point. The blue COP has to have a blue outcome. So very well put, and we'll continue in the coming days. We have to leave because there is another event coming up. Thank you very much. You've been very good.